The Great Pumpkin. My stepfather had a friend whose name was Nelson. Nelson built our house on Branch Lake in Ellsworth, and also did other jobs for us as well. Nelson was more of a field boss, though, these days. Or, shall we say, Nelson couldn't move around so much anymore. You see, he had a disorder where he would just eat. Eat even when he wasn't even hungry. He'd eat just whatever he wanted to or didn't want to. It didn't really matter. He liked anything and everything, especially sweets. He at one point had been quite svelte, though, and remembered the days he could hurry up a ladder or jump down into a foundation. And Nelson always loved to hunt, and would go up with my stepfather on hunting trips to the Allagash every season. Up there, Nelson became, I hate to say it, kind of a liability, as the others were never sure if he'd make it into camp, or if the canoe would even hold him, let alone him and another hunter. That said, sometimes he would choose to walk in. It was quite a production, quite a show, as it's quite a ways, you know. And Nelson would have to stop every few steps to catch his breath. He was a good sport about it, though. The others, not so much, but, they tolerated it, because they all loved him. Because, Nelson was a nice guy. But one day they looked at him and was all dressed up in quadruple XL blaze orange from head to toe, round as round can be, and that was when Nelson feigned the nickname, the Great Pumpkin. Sometimes Nelson would be the butt end of a joke or an off-ass comment, though, especially if they'd all been drinking. And they'd bring a lot of booze into camp. I mean, what if we got snowed in or something? Which did happen way back when, though. Bump once told the story where couldn't drive in and only could be taken in by a pontoon plane. And they couldn't land because the snow was so deep. Anyway, they'd go through a lot of booze up there. Pee off the porch, shoot bottles in the woods and in the lake, which Bump later regretted. Jesus, wish we hadn't done that. And they loved to eat up there, and they loved to drink, and Nelson was right there with them. And even though he was large, and the others would drink about as much as him and eat about as much as him, just had a different metabolism is all. On one hunting trip, my stepfather, probably tight as tight can be, said out loud while the whole gang was up there, Dave Ballard, Bump, himself, Merlin, and Mallet, of course the Great Pumpkin. They're all sitting around the fire after playing a round of blow darts and skimming dirty magazines from the 60s. My stepfather yells out, "Hey, Nelson! I'll bet you can't lose 200 pounds. Or bet you can't get down below 200. Back your fighting weight." Nelson, all red-cheeked from the scotch and sitting next to the fire, said, "What's your wager? If I do it?" And the gang all stopped. They all stopped what they were doing, wondering what would happen next. "Well," my stepfather continued, "I know you've been looking at a new bird gun. Heard about it from Ballard, down to Willie's. Well, that's a mighty fine gun, and I want one. I'll bet you that shotgun that you can't do it." And Nelson, sitting in his chair, round as round can be, nothing but his long johns on. "Thou, you're on. When I get back to Sargentville, I'm going on a diet. I'm going to look real good with that gun next season." My stepfather smiled. He's a provoker, But he really loved Nelson, and they all did. So after they drove the 200-mile dirt road, got on the highway back to their prospective homes, and the weeks went by. And they checked in on each other, calling and talking about Nelson and how the Great Pumpkin was doing. Even Nana, who heard from Bump up there about the story, she was wondering, "How's Nelson doing on that diet? I sure hope he's doing all right. And I bet it sure's going to be difficult during the holidays and all. Always is. I've been going to body recall 3 times a week, and I'll tell you, I feel wonderful, but it's had. That's what Nelson's doing, Body recall." "Well," my stepfather said one day, "I hadn't heard hide nor hair of him. The Great Pumpkin, He's gone radio silent, as they say. So what do? I go down there to see what he was building. New house for some sextons down there at the bridge. Big place, for some nice folks from away. Think they even went into business together, building for a while. Anyway, I go down there, investigate, have a look round. Then I sees him. And would you look at that? Nelson's slimmed down. It's not close by any means, but it's damn near noticeable, I'll say. So I goes up to him and I say, "Hey, Nelson, proud of you. You're gaining on her all the time." Nelson looked up, his eyes fixed right up on my stepfather, and he says, "Lost 100 pounds. Damn diet got me eating squash. Tell ya, it's real difficult. Worst craving is cake and pie. Sometimes crack and have a snack, eat the whole damn thing and cry. Think I'll die. But then I keep going. Haven't stuck my finger down my throat or anything like that yet, but thought about it. And I'll keep going because, well, you look great, Nelson, and honestly, I don't really want a gun sitting above my fireplace next year." And Merlin, Nelson's best friend and sidekick right there beside him, who earned the nickname because he seemed to work magic with wood, best known for stairs, windows not so much because they came out a little bit crooked. Maybe that's why he got the name Merlin, because, kind of poking fun at one job he stove all up to hell probably years ago. But, it stuck. So my stepfather then repeats himself, "Don't want that gun above my..." And then Nelson cuts him right off because he's getting irritable. "Will you shut up about that gun? I'm tired of hearing about it. And I don't want you gloating around the rest of my life." So then my stepfather up and leaves. And when he gets home, he tells all of us, of course. My mom, Dave, Missy, and Jad. Then he calls Bump, and then Ballard and Mallet, tells them all what he saw. "Today I saw the great pumpkin. And by the Jesus, he's losing the weight." "Well, how much?" they all asked. "Don't know, can't tell for sure, probably 100 pounds. He looks great though, but it's only July. And he's got 3 months to go. And I don't know. It's a lot of weight." And they all asked the same question. "You thinking he'll do it?" And my stepfather replied, "Hope so." Well, a couple months went by, and it was getting down there, time of reckoning, and my stepfather then got a call. It was his brother-in-law, Ballard, Dave Ballard, and he talks real loud, like he's hollering almost. And he says, "Well, David," my stepfather's name was David too, there were a lot of Davids, and it gets confusing, but anyway, David says to David, "I have some news, but I want you to be kind. Nelson was into Willie's yesterday looking at that gun. Had the salesman take it right down for him. Said he'd like to buy it. Now, David, I don't know, but if it comes down to it, I want you to be gracious. That is, if I think my feeling's right, and I trust this feeling's right, it's probably right. Just be gracious is all." And my stepfather just laid the phone back down into its bag. Shortly thereafter, Nelson came down our road one day in his truck. He stepped out of the cab and walked to our front door. Used the lobster knocker thingy that anyone never really used. And my stepfather answered the door. There was Nelson, gun in hand. And there was a pause. And when my stepfather was about to speak, Nelson said, "I couldn't do it. Here's your damn gun. Now I'd appreciate it if you just let me alone." And my stepfather started to say something, but he caught himself. And Nelson then turned and walked back to his truck, pulling his pants up, and got into it and peeled out of the driveway. It was bark chips, and it left a little mark. I don't think Nelson ever went hunting with the gang again. He was some 10 pounds shy, they say, maybe 20. Nonetheless, somebody saw him a few years later down the B&Ls across the street from his house. But word got round up to Nana in Presque Isle while she was sitting in a rocker. She said aloud, "And he's heavier now than he's ever been. Damn it, then. and Nana never swore. Damn it! I feel for him.